In one heartbeat, Eddard Stark faced doom in King's Landing and chose trial by combat over confession. Would mercy triumph, or would the realm splinter under such defiance? Step into the torchlit halls of the Red Keep to witness a choice that might reshape this realm. An alternate thread in the saga of ice and fire awaits, where honor dares to clash with cunning, and fate hangs in the balance. Torchlight shimmered on damp walls as Lord Eddard Stark trudged below the Red Keep, 2 City Watch guards escorting him in creased, dusty cloaks. The chains around his wrists rattled, each link a grim reminder of how swiftly honor could turn to peril. Though air clung muggy and stale, a deeper chill burrowed under his skin. Fear for Sansa and Arya, each lost in the game being played overhead. He thought of Robert Baratheon's boisterous mirth, once a promise of stable rule, now gone, replaced by a vicious court orchestrated by a boy king. The corridor echoed with water dripping somewhere out of sight, an uneasy tempo matching his own dread. "Keep moving, my lord," one guard muttered, not with contempt but resigned acceptance. Ned set his jaw, forging ahead in bleak resolve. He might be walking to his final stand, yet thoughts of his daughters steeled him. If he wavered, they would suffer. Their safety anchored him in that dark labyrinth. "I served with loyalty," asterisk, he told himself. But justice dwindles under false crowns. Asterisk. Behind every step, he felt the weight of tragedies that might still unfold. Yet a faint spark of determination flickered. If any path remained to save his girls, he would see whatever the cost. The throne room opened before them in torchlit splendor, each flame revealing pillars that soared toward a vaulted ceiling. The Iron Throne rose on its dais, a hulk of distorted welded swords, symbolizing power few could wield without bloodshed. And now Joffrey Baratheon of Inch, a Lannister, presided over it. Cersei leaned nearby, her green eyes alight with cruel confidence. Varys stood with folded hands. Baelish wore his trademark smirk, and Grand Maester Pycelle hovered, chain clinking softly. On the floor, Sansa Stark trembled, a lone figure in a court of sharks. "Lord Stark," Joffrey's shrill tone rang across the marble. "You're accused of treason. Kneel to your king." Ned's knees would not bend. "I see no rightful kingly a boy on a stolen seat." A charged silence followed. Cersei's mouth set in a thin line. Joffrey's eyes blazed. "Confess, or I'll have your daughter executed." Every instinct screamed for Ned to protect Sansa, but then he recalled the final weapon of the unjustly accused. "I demand trial by combat," he said, voice steadier than he felt. An uproar spread through the crowd. Some looked stunned. Others whispered about the unstoppable might of the mountain. Joffrey snarled, "Who will fight for you, Stark? Your northern lords are far away." Before Ned spoke, a calm voice interjected, "I shall. For him, and for justice." Sir Barristan Selmy, once the greatest living knight, stepped forward to meet the challenge. Sir Barristan Selmy, armor scuffed and aged, but spirit unbroken, faced the royal dais. He had served proudly until Joffrey cast him aside for younger blades. Yet a knight's vow stood beyond royal whims. "You oppose the throne?" Joffrey snapped. Barristan replied evenly, "I uphold the realm's laws, your grace. If Lord Stark invokes trial by combat, he is entitled to a champion." Cersei's cold smile flicked toward the shadows. "Gregor Clegane come forth." A hush seized the room as Gregor Clegane stomped forward. He towered over the assembly, every inch bristling with raw power. Ned felt the guards clamp his arms, preventing any interference. He caught Barristan's eye. The older knight gave a small nod, as though to say, "Trust me." Asterisk, the mountain struck first, sword slicing down with lethal force. Barristan deflected with a harsh clang of steel. Sparks danced across the floor. Onlookers reeled back, uncertain whether to cheer or flee. Their swords met again and again, Gregor's blows savage, Barristan's technique precise. The mountain growled, launching a crushing swing. Barristan twisted aside, though the impact shuddered through his arms. Then, in an impossibly swift thrust, Barristan slipped his blade beneath Gregor's visor. A collective gasp echoed as Gregor stumbled, thick blood seeping from the narrow wound. He tried to raise his sword, but his knees buckled. A final gargled breath escaped him, and he collapsed in a thunderous crash. Barristan withdrew his blade, chest rising with labored breaths. The court erupted in shock. Even Joffrey sat speechless. By ancient custom, the gods had cleared Ned Stark of the charge of treason. Yet no triumph glimmered in his eyes. Joffrey, eyes hooded with rage, spat, "He may go free, but my betrothed stays. If Stark dares cross me, she dies." Chains fell from Ned's wrists, but there was no joy. Sansa stood trembling, out of reach. Helplessness sliced at his heart like a cruel blade. Still, Ned would not abandon her forever, even if the moment demanded retreat. He would return. The Lannisters would learn that a Stark's love was mightier than their threats. When Ned emerged from the Red Keep alongside Sir Barristan, whispers raced among the crowds in King's Landing. He had survived a trial by combat that slew the fearsome mountain. The stories spread like wildfire through crooked alleys and busy squares. Gold cloaks and small folk alike gave him uneasy glances, unsure whether to admire or dread him. But Ned's thoughts lay with Sansa. She remained behind, hostage to a vicious court. He and Barristan approached the city's towering gates, obtaining 2 half-broken horses. It was clear the Lannisters wanted him gone, but undermined. "You saved my life," Ned said to Barristan in subdued gratitude. The knight replied, "I did what was just, yet justice alone won't free your daughter. We must choose our next move wisely, or the Queen's cunning will prevail." Ned nodded grimly, each hoofbeat carrying him farther from Sansa's world. "I'll never forgive myself for leaving her behind. But if I stayed, she'd be in greater danger." Barristan agreed. "We'll find another path to rescue her. Be patient, my lord." Ned steadied his emotions, clinging to purpose. Sansa, Aryaboth needed his protection. The road ahead would be perilous, but a father's resolve outweighed every threat King's Landing could muster. Back in the Red Keep, the aftermath of Ned's release stirred a hornet's nest. King Joffrey raged over losing a dramatic public display of vengeance. Cersei's ambitions simmered. Securing her son's rule meant subduing or destroying potential rivals. Foremost among them were the Baratheon brothers, Stannis and Renly, each staking a claim rooted in rightful succession if Joffrey's parentage was questioned. Tywin Lannister, as ever, grasped the realm's bigger picture. He financed pirates and mercenaries, dispatching Jaime Lannister to crush Stannis at Dragonstone. Though defiant, Stannis lacked sufficient forces to withstand a large-scale siege. Outnumbered and cornered, he made a final valiant stand, but ultimately fell to Lannister's steel. Renly retreated to the Reach, hoping House Tyrell would join his cause. Yet Tywin offered them a sweeter deal. Margaery Tyrell wed to King Joffrey, thus bonding the Tyrell wealth and armies to the throne. Renly found himself quickly outmaneuvered. He died abruptly, some whispered crossbow bolts, others muttered darker sorcery. With the Baratheon threats removed, Joffrey seemed poised to reign unopposed, though Sansa Stark's forced betrothal served as further leverage against the North. Meanwhile, the Riverlands continued to smart from Gregor Clegane's brutal raids. Trouble brewed there, for House Tully refused to forget such atrocities. Eddard Stark, however, made his way to Riverrun, where Catelyn rushed to his side, relief soaking her voice. "You're alive? But Sansa? Arya?" Ned's eyes gleamed with sorrow. "Arya slipped away from King's Landing, I believe. Sansa remains captive." Tears traced down Catelyn's cheeks. "Then we've lost everything. How can we break the hold of that false king?" Ned set his jaw. "We will fight. The Lannisters think one captive daughter can halt us. They're mistaken if they believe the North will kneel to cruelty forever." Side by side, they realized that war was not merely a grim possibility, but a looming certainty. Their daughter was a pawn in this game. Stark refused to be caged by fear. For the first time, Ned felt something beyond dread, an ember of defiance, smoldering with the hope of reclaiming justice in a kingdom turned upside down. Within the walls of Riverrun, Ned sat with Catelyn, Edmure Tully, and the Blackfish, Brynden Tully. Sebastian remained watchful, a quiet testament to steadfast principle. "We must free Sansa," Catelyn insisted, desperation in her gaze. "That boy on the throne is capable of anything." Edmure, nursing a lingering injury, said, "If we rush King's Landing, Tywin Lannister will respond with a crushing host." Ned pressed a hand to his temple. "The Lannisters are strong, but the North stands on our side, and the Tullys remember Gregor Clegane's savagery. We can't charge blindly. Sansa's life hangs on every choice." Brynden Tully paced, arms folded behind his back. "Let them come to us. On our ground, we might hold an advantage that even Tywin's wealth can't easily break." Barristan murmured, "A strategic standoff could force a negotiation. Cersei is cunning, but she'll hesitate if that is too high. Joffrey's unpredictable, though he'd see a kingdom burn to keep his pride." Ned let out a long breath. "Robert should have left a stable realm, but we've inherited chaos. We'll gather our forces in the north, protect the Riverlands, and refuse to kneel. One day we'll reclaim my daughter." Catelyn laid a trembling hand on his shoulder. "We'll stand with you, Ned. The old ways favor those who remain steadfast, no matter the storm." Outside, the red fork of the trident flowed steadily, as though reflecting the quiet determination within Riverrun's halls. Soldiers drilled, forging unity among riverlords and the loyal men Ned had summoned. Sansa was still captive, Arya lost, and the Iron Throne manipulated by a ruthless family. But House Stark would not yield. Their next step was clear: gather their strength, brace for conflict, and keep alive the flame of hope that honor might still triumph in a land consumed by treachery. North in Winterfell, Robb Stark scanned his father's urgent letter with trembling fingers. Lords of the North Greatjon Umber, Roose Bolton, Rickard Karstark, and others assembled to hear the news. Robb read aloud, "Sansa captive, Arya missing, the throne claimed by a false king. Eddard Stark would no longer bend the knee." A chorus of outrage followed. The Greatjon roared, slamming his fist on a wooden bench. "We'll never submit to a craven boy," Roose Bolton, cold-eyed, added. "Yet we must be cunning. Invaders must cross the neck, and Moat Cailin can hold them if we prepare well." Robb steadied himself, trying not to appear overwhelmed. "We'll reinforce Moat Cailin. We'll stock supplies, fortify the castle. If Tywin Lannister wants war, he'll find the North unyielding." The lords shouted approval, rising in solidarity with House Stark. Robb, though young, felt centuries of Stark lineage urging him forward. He must protect his people, protect his captive sister, and somehow reclaim their honor. Later, in the flickering light of Winterfell's hearth, Robb paced while Grey Wind kept watch. He remembered Sansa's laughter when dreaming of gallant knights. Now she was bound to a merciless king, a pawn in a lethal game. "I won't abandon you, Sansa," he vowed, "nor will father." Above the castle towers, a chill wind carried the foreboding words of House Stark. "Winter is coming." And so it was, with Lannister might set to clash against the unbroken will of the North. Blood would likely stain these snows before the end, but the Starks had endured countless winter sand. They would endure this onslaught as well. Tywin Lannister refused to tolerate defiance from the North. He forged a massive war host, uniting his own banners with those of House Tyrell, newly allied through marriage prospects. Their combined forces dwarfed any single northern contingent. Jaime Lannister led an advance to Moat Cailin, only to face the swampy neck. Horses got stuck, soldiers succumbed to sickness, and hidden archers tormented their flanks. The proud Lannister column faltered, bogged down in a land that devoured armies. Brynden Blackfish Tully struck from the shadows, destroying supply wagons and sapping the invaders' spirit. Jaime attempted direct assaults on Moat Cailin's crumbling towers, but achieved no breakthrough. Each defeat stoked his fury, with no victory in sight. Alerted to his son's struggles, Tywin marched north along the King's Road, bringing more Tyrell spears and sellswords. This formidable host arrived at Winterfell in grim, late-autumn weather. Behind Winterfell's walls, Eddard Stark prepared with resolute calm, joined by lords from the Riverlands. Sir Barristan Selmy stood ready, his oath to Ned unbroken. Outside, Tywin established camp, hundreds of fires lighting the plains. Dawn revealed siege towers and catapults rolling forward through fresh snow. Stones crashed against Winterfell's walls. Archers returned fire, and northern defenders mustered axes and spears behind gatehouses. Hours of brutal combat ensued. Lannister men scaled sections of the outer ramparts, only to be repulsed by fierce counterattacks. Shouts of pain mingled with howling wind. Crimson banners faced gray walls in a merciless exchange of lives. By dusk, Tywin drew back, regrouping his battered forces. Winterfell still stood, battered but defiant. On a parapet dusted with snow, Ned surveyed the day's casualties with grim resolve. The thought of Sansa lingered held captive by the same family, now hammering at his doorstep. Yet every survivor's courage fueled him to fight on, for he would not bow to the lion's roar. Darkness settled with icy finality, the snow drifting in silent veils across a battlefield stained with fresh blood. Flickering campfires dotted the night, illuminating haggard men tending wounds or staring at nothing. Crows perched on battlements, drawn by the promise of carrion. In Winterfell's great hall, Ned, Robb, and their bannermen studied a map. Roose Bolton's inscrutable stare roamed over enemy positions, the blackfish paced, brimming with pent-up tension. Catelyn stood close by, determined not to cower from war. Sir Barristan spoke calmly. "Your people fought with heart, Lord Stark, yet Tywin is relentless." Ned nodded, lines of worry deepening on his face. "They have numbers, but we have these wall-sand snow to hinder their siege towers." He closed his eyes, recalling Sansa's terror. "Wait for me," he thought. Catelyn whispered, "No news of Arya?" A scout shook his head apologetically. "She vanished after your arrest in King's Landing, my lady." Robb clenched his jaw. "This castle is our lifeline. If it falls, the north is open to them. Moat Cailin is one barrier, but Tywin is already here." Suddenly, a horn boomed thrice across the wintry silence. Old tales claimed 3 blasts heralded something beyond mortal foes. Men froze, staring at each other in alarm. Then the horn sounded again, carrying on a biting wind that seemed too cold, too real. "Is this a Lannister trick?" Catelyn asked, heart pounding. From the battlements came a shout. "Shapes in the wolfswood huge and unnatural." A wave of dread rippled through everyone. Even Tywin's sentries had gone quiet, sensing something uncanny. Jaime Lannister emerged from his tent, berating men who quailed in the snow. In a corner of Winterfell's corridor, Bran Stark appeared, Hodor by his side. The boy's eyes carried a haunted look. "They've come from the far north," he murmured. "The cold that devours the living." Ned's breath caught. His mind flashed to the distant wall, the legends of the long night. If such fables were real, then this war might prove meaningless compared to a threat that cared nothing for crowns. Outside, the wind rose, carrying a shrill cry of inhuman origin. The world felt poised on the brink of something far worse than any earthly conflict. A raw, ancient fear stirred on both sides of the siege. The sky darkened further, snow spinning wildly as that eerie wail sounded again. Soldiers fumbled for torches, hoping fire could drive away whatever prowled in the swirling frost. Tywin Lannister emerged from the gloom, jaw clenched. Jaime tried to rally knights, who muttered about ghosts. In the faint torchlight, a pale figure flickered at the edge of sight, then vanished with a bone-chilling shriek. Horses stamped in panic. On Winterfell's gatehouse, Ned turned to Sir Barristan. "If these are the beings of old nightmares, we face peril greater than Lannister armies." Up on the battlements, the Blackfish barked orders, but men found themselves half paralyzed. Even the fearless Great John Umber showed flickers of doubt. Horn calls rang again, seeming to come from nowhere and everywhere. Bran stood near a brazier, a raven on his arm. His voice trembled with certainty. "I dreamed this. They bring an endless cold and raise the dead to fight for them." Ned swallowed. "We can't remain enemies if death itself comes." The old warnings of the Night's Watch filled his thoughts. We are all unprepared. Asterisk, across the field, Tywin recognized something unnatural. Reach soldiers exchanged terrified glances, while the sellswords realized gold mattered little if the foe were no mere mortals. A fleeting gap in the snow revealed a slender silhouette with eyes that glowed an unearthly blue. In an instant, it disappeared again, leaving only footprints that frosted over. Ned gripped the stone merlon. If these creatures are real, the realm's petty wars must cease, or all will perish. Asterisk. But would Lannisters and Starks truly unite in time, or would their feuds lead them to oblivion? Outside the walls, the snow thickened, and that unholy wail rose once more. Men prayed to any god who might listen. The living now realized that the enemy on the horizon made no distinction between lion or wolf. They were simply prey. Bells rang frantic alarms into the dark, while a cruel wind scattered snow in icy gusts. Figures shambled at the edge of torchlight, some clad in rotting armor, others half-bone and driven by a grim will. One guard screamed, dropping his spear, only to vanish in a swirl of white. Another tried holding position, but was dragged away with a desperate cry. Ned watched from Winterfell's walls as horror spread through both armies. "Open the gates for those fleeing!" he shouted. Even a Lannister uniform meant nothing, now these creatures slaughtered indiscriminately. "From the tree line!" came a shout from Roose Bolton. His men aimed arrows, some lit with oil-soaked cloth. Shafts flew, crackling as they struck dead flesh or vanished in whirling snow. On the field, Tywin Lannister mustered all his iron resolve. "Hold formation!" he roared at soldiers tempted to bolt. Jaime drew his shining steel, trying to protect a cluster of riders. Then a silent presence slid among Thema White Walker, sword glimmering like razor-thin ice. Jaime's blow bounced away with a burst of sparks, flinging him aside. Men scattered, panic consuming them. Among the fallen, corpses twitched, stirring under an eerie blue glow. They rose, eyes empty, forming a monstrous legion. Terror seemed to soak the ground as shrieks of the dying merged with the hiss of frozen blades. "Alliance!" Ned yelled to Barristan and the Blackfish. "We must help Tywin, or we'll all die." Barristan dashed to a smaller gate. Several half-frozen Lannister outriders stumbled in, bloodied and gasping. "Inside, hurry!" he commanded, guiding them to safety as northern archers held the horrors at bay. Ned and Robb saw monstrous shapes prowling just beyond the torchlit perimeter. Robb's face turned ashen. How do we fight nightmares come to life? Finally, more Lannister spearmen reached the castle, dragging Jaime, who was bruised but alive. Ned helped him inside, meeting no protest from the Kingslayer. Hostilities had no place when an inhuman horde threatened every beating heart. Beyond the gates, Tywin still fought, refusing to retreat. White silhouettes converged, unstoppable as frost incarnate. Sparks lit the darkness where normal steel clashed with unearthly ice. Ned realized with dreadful clarity that no castle walls, no southern king, no old claims to power would matter if these creatures advanced unchallenged. The living faced extinction unless they united. Pride and grudges had reached their final hour of relevance. In Winterfell's courtyard, men who'd been enemies only hours before huddled in shock. Stark soldiers and Tyrell knights exchanged looks, haunted by what they had just witnessed. Swords meant for each other now dripped with the blood of uncanny horrors. Ned crossed to Jaime, who leaned on a wall, chest heaving. "We can't remain divided," Ned said in a low voice. "If these creatures breach our defenses, we all fall." Jaime, blood trickling down his temple, managed a nod. "I never thought I'd say it, Stark, but you're right." A wounded officer arrived, trembling. "Lord Tywin is still out there." A pang cut through Ned. Tywin Lannister was his sworn foe, yet also a father. Ned glanced at Jaime, who locked eyes with him in silent alarm. Barristan placed a hand on Ned's shoulder. "We can try to bring him in." Swallowing his pride, Ned gave a curt nod. "Open the gate, fetch him. We stand or die together now." Clanging chains and shouting men signaled the final rescue attempt. Outside, the dead prowled in swirling snow, while every living soul within Winterfell felt dread settle in their bones. No longer was this about houses or claims. Survival overshadowed old vendettas, forging a unity of necessity born under the darkest night. Night's pale moonlight fell over broken siege towers and drifted snow. Stark riders ventured out with a small Lannister cavalry detachment, torches flaring against the wind. Through that eerie gloom darting shapes lurked, glimpsed once before fading into the white. They discovered wounded men huddled behind splintered ramps, too terrified to move. Gently, they guided them toward Winterfell's glow. At the heart of that wasteland, Tywin Lannister still fought, sword battered against relentless foes. Frost clung to his hair, his armor dented from repeated clashes. The undead ringed him, swinging brittle blades that gleamed with an unnatural shimmer. Tywin refused to yield, eyes fierce with pride and desperation. Spurring their horses, the rescue riders roared in unison, hurling fire-tipped spears. Shrieks erupted among the whites as flames licked at frozen flesh. Sir Barristan carved through a tangle of corpses, sending shattered limbs spinning in the snow. Hauling Tywin onto a spare mount, the riders saw the shock in his face. He said nothing, but Ned read the sober awareness in those eyes. The realm's old rivalries meant nothing now. Racing back through swirling drifts, they thundered under Winterfell's opened gates. Guards slammed them shut at once, relief rippling across Starks and Lannisters alike. For a single moment, there was no hatred-only shared survival in the face of a nightmare. Silence fell as both sides grappled with reality. The dead were real, prowling just beyond the walls, unstoppable if left unchecked. Dawn felt far away, and no victory sounded certain. Within Winterfell's great hall, exhausted survivors gathered. Some collapsed on straw pallets, tended by healers who wrapped gashes or soothed frostbitten limbs. Others propped themselves against pillars, eyes vacant, still clutching swords. Only a handful of knights retained enough vigor to stand guard near the entrance, torches raised to spot any renewed assault from the undead shadows roaming outside. Tywin Lannister slumped beside a brazier, his breathing ragged. Jaime hovered close, betraying uncharacteristic worry. Nearby, Ned Stark leaned against the high table, arms folded, mind racing through possibilities. Barristan Selmy watched each flicker of torchlight with vigilance, scanning for the next threat. Robb Stark approached, stiff, with cold but resolute. "We can't hide here forever, Father. If these creatures are truly raising more dead, they'll multiply. Our walls won't hold indefinitely." Ned pressed his fingers to his temple, nodding wearily. "The Night's Watch has warned of dangers beyond the wall for ages. We never believed them. Now we see how blind we were." Catelyn knelt by the fire, handing Tywin a cup of hot broth. "We've all lost so much tonight," she murmured, her tone devoid of rancor. "No ancient grudge will matter if they break in." Tywin took a measured sip, eyeing Ned over the rim. House Stark and House Lannister have no love for each other. But what I witnessed, those things defy any notion of war I've known. If they roam freely, they'll sweep the realm. A hush fell, men steeling themselves against old grudges. Jaime broke the silence with forced composure. "Father's right. We won't survive otherwise." Barristan nodded. "We must summon every ally. The living must stand as one. If we scatter, we fall." Ned met Tywin's gaze. "My daughter Sansa is still in King's Landing. Would you rather keep her hostage, or help me save her? Joffrey is mercurial. She remains in danger." Tywin grimaced, pride wrestling with pragmatism. "I'll urge the court to treat her gently. If we're uniting, holding your daughter prisoner is short-sighted." Ned exhaled, relief tinged with caution. "Then let this be the first step toward a truce. The North will call its banners anew. You gather the Crownlands and the Reach. We learn whether the Night's Watch still holds the wall." A faint flicker of grim accord crossed the hall. Hostile stares lingered, but necessity overshadowed old hatreds. Outside, the wind-battered stone and wood, a reminder that time slipped away. Somewhere far south, Sansa endured a forced betrothal, praying for deliverance. Arya roamed lonely roads, oblivious to the terrors spreading north. And here in Winterfell, an unlikely alliance formed, fragile as spun glass. For all of them, the only hope lay in setting aside feuds and bracing for the true onslaught still gathering beyond sight. We end here, standing on a razor's edge between monstrous peril and tentative unity. Lions and wolves, once bitter foes, now discover a threat surpassing any claim to a throne. Will they close ranks quickly enough, or will old grievances tear them apart before daylight? If you crave the rest of this tale, please like and subscribe. At 2,000 subscribers, we'll deliver Part 2, shaped by your theories and thoughts. Share your ideas below. Could Joffrey truly spare Sansa? Would Jaime uphold any alliance with the Starks? Where does Arya's journey lead? And do the White Walkers prowl beyond even the neck? Tell us your visions for our next chapter. We'll weave the best suggestions into the growing tapestry. In this uncertain twilight, only one truth stands. Winter has arrived, and it holds horrors beyond imagination. Unite with us to see which houses survive and which are lost to the eternal chill. Let us craft the next chapter together, forging a shared story under icebound skies. The night is dark indeed, and we stand on the brink of a war not even kings can control.